Well. If you have not yet, I encourage you actually to go visit the christiannation.online, the christiannation.online, the christiannation.online, all small letters, or you just do a Google search, and then you will discover that website or that site where I post much of the teachings, the discipleship material that I conduct. Good news and wonderful news from that platform. We have crossed more than 3,000 downloads. We are 3,000. Last time I checked, 3,256 downloads. And on a daily basis, sometimes we see more than 10 downloads. On other occasions, you just come up and you find more than 100 downloads. And my hope is that we hit, say, 10,000 or even a million. Hopefully, it's going to come to pass. But as you interact with the platform, leave a message, talk to us, and tell us, give us testimonies, give me some feedback. Because as a lot of activity, people taking up the messages, downloading them, and listening to them. And I encourage you actually to share them. Now, this evening, I want to draw your attention to one of the episodes that I titled Spirit Cities, where I mentioned Egypt, I mentioned Sodom and Gomorrah, I mentioned Babylon, then I also mentioned Celestial Zion. And it is the most downloaded episode with more than 300 downloads to date. It is amazing because it draws from Revelation chapter 11. Revelation chapter 11, concerning the mystery that says that Jesus Christ was crucified in a city called Egypt and Sodom, spiritually. But we know that physically the man was crucified, he was killed in Jerusalem. So, how do you reconcile that? One thing that we need to understand is that there is a mystery here at work. There is such a thing as spiritual cities. And when a spiritual city blankets a physical city that is by men, you begin to manifest. It begins to manifest the characteristics. In fact, you can look and discern and get to know which kind of spiritual city is actually at work or is having effect in the nation. It does not matter whether it is your city or your nation. So you can look at certain pointers. Now, if to know all those things, you need to go listen to that episode on the Christian Nation dot online. Now, I want to give you a primer, a little bit of my understanding of this mystery. Number one, there is not a single civilization that arises on this planet except that there be a spiritual principality that inspires men, that stirs men, that equips men with ambition, that drives men, that gathers hearts. There is not an empire that does that. There is not an ideology that has a global reach and appeal, especially an ideology that is anti-Christ in nature, that doesn't have a spiritual principality behind it in driving it, making men and women believe in it and accept it and practice it and live by its ethos. There is not. Now, how do you judge the nature or the origins of whatever civilization or whatever ideology or way of thinking or ethos? How do you judge to tell whether it is from God or it is from the powers of darkness? Now, the simple test is actually very simple because Jesus himself says that by their fruits you shall know them. By their fruits. It is as simple as that. So you can look at the product, the fruit of that ideology. If the ideology results in the destruction or in the death of millions, it definitely came from Lucifer. And therefore, socialism and communism and different other ideologies that glorify death or that live for the destruction of countless others so that to establish some form of utopia or to reach the promised land, whenever you find such kind of ideology, you need to understand that it has come from Lucifer. So where do civilizations begin from? what is the beginning of civilization. We need to go back. And one of the documents that claims by inspiration that claims to tell the story of mankind from his very beginnings, is actually the Bible. So how do we trace out to identify the beginning of civilizations and say the Bible? It is quite easy. So you need to go back to the first man, that is Adam. He gives birth. He gives birth to two sons. One is Abel, the other is Cain. Cain kills his brother, and then God judges Cain and drives him from the presence of God. Then we are told that when he was driven away from the presence of God, he gave birth to a son. He begot a son, and he named him Enoch. Now, the name Enoch, these guys never used names lightly. The name Enoch means dedicated, consecrated, set apart, sort of like a priest. So he was, in essence, the first priest spawning a civilization. Because we are told that his father then went on to build a city and he named it Enoch, dedicated. And so the days went on, and what happened is that in that civilization, we find another man, a descendant of Cain, who practices polygamy. So it was the first civilization to register polygamy. And he kills a man to his own heart. And he says that if Cain is to be avenged 7 times, then he should be avenged 7 times, 7 times. All right. So that was the civilization. And then when Eve sees, when Eve and Adam see that Abel was dead, they give birth to a son, and his name is Seth, another appointed in the place of the one that was killed. And Seth, seeing the experiences and the exploits of the civilization that was without God, that was after and in the nature of Cain, gives birth to a son and calls him Enosh. And Enosh means mortal man. In other words, death. So who was carrying out death? What was the fruit, or what was responsible for mankind dying in those days? So much so that the reality was that man was mortal. It was the civilization of Cain, spawned through his son Enoch. So fast forward, then we come to the 10th chapter of the book of Genesis, where we find that there is a man, another man that rises up, a son of Cush. His name is called Nimrod. So, and we are told that Nimrod began to be a mighty man. Now, the actual rendering, the Hebrew rendering there, it says that he began to desecrate himself. So everything that God said you should not do, he did. He desecrated himself and he gave himself over to powers of darkness. And from him comes the Tower of Babel, or he established cities. So there was Erech, Calneh, and there was Babel. And at Babel is where mankind is gathered under the leadership of Nimrod. And that's where the greatest rebellion, or the so-called the globalist rebellion, it's the same thing. It's the same manifestation that we are seeing today, actually, when nations want to blur everything that would make them distinct as nations, and they want to become a one entity on the planet. God is not a globalist, he is a nationalist. God believes in nations, he created nations. So Babel is overthrown, and from there we come to the table of the nations that are in total 70 in number. And in fact, globally, if you look at the language families all over the world, they are around 90 something, 90 something. From there are the civilization, the spiritual civilization. Because over these 70 is appointed 70 sons of God, angelic beings. But these guys, they fail. So angels have not just fallen once at the fall of Lucifer or in chapter 6 according to Genesis, but they have fallen 3 times. So these 70 sons of God, they gave their authority over to Lucifer. And so, dear friend, these are the principalities we are told about in the book of Ephesians chapter 6. Go catch the entire message and more messages at the Christian nation. And then you will know all these things in the